Interesting. As you hold on for us, we'll quickly listen to the Energy Minister. We will listen to two members of Parliament who have had something to say about the Bostgate scandal, and then we'll come back to you to explain to us your position as you have expressed in your press release. Now, let's hear the Honorable Boakye Jackor, then Muta Wakilu, as well as Haruna Idrisu, the minority leader in Parliament.
Minister told journalists that though they have...
This is a pure cover-up. Please, let's be serious, Ghanaians. Nana Addo and Bawumia government must be serious. They must take Ghanaians serious. This massive corruption that has taken place, you single out the MD. Is it because we in minority are calling for the head of the MD? And that is the justice call, very clear justice we made by saying that the MD should step aside. Investigation should be continued. With this cover-up, all what the committee will be doing is impotent.
Why didn't you
produce any resource? They are simply using BNI as a cover-up for the MD to continue and stay in office and stifle the work of the committee that they have set up. Even the committee, how can you give them term of reference without a time frame to bring the report? That itself is a big problem. The committee can take 1 year, can take 4 years, can take 10 years to submit their report. So you see the intentional move by Nana Addo Bawumia government to ensure that the corruption that has taken place at BOST do not go anywhere. This is very clear.
So what are you expecting? That this committee should have been given the mandate to investigate the BOST MD as well on whether or not he did the right thing?
Very, very important. The committee, first of all, the BOST MD should have stepped aside, should have at least interdicted by now to show a sign that the President Nana Akufo-Addo and Bawumia are committed to fighting corruption. Let the investigation go on. You give them a time frame within which to submit the report. None of this has happened. So the committee is just giving a field day.
At BOST, corruption at BOST, gargantuan cover up at BOST. We don't want to believe that they ran away from investigations to throw sunshine on the happening as BOST is a result of threats from some leading members of the MPP to expose them if they went high-handed appropriately to deal with this particular issue. We trust that they are not yielding to those partisan considerations. But even as they are afraid, we are worried and we are concerned as a minority that the Bureau of National Investigation, a respected state intelligence and security agency, should not be reduced this low. Should not be reduced this low. And its integrity should not be compromised on the altar of partisan favoritism. And therefore, the BNI, we have some advice for them. You recall that even when we were vetting, there was some official correspondence from the BNI to Parliament, the Appointments Committee, that turned out to be misleading, even though they have not publicly come out to tell us that what they formally gave to Parliament was reliable, accurate, or inaccurate. We will challenge them to do so, or else they risk being cited for contempt of Parliament, because they are a state institution of the Republic, and they owe the Parliament of Ghana every reasonable, accurate information. So if they give information to Parliament that turns out to be untrue, they have a duty to establish the veracity of what they communicated. I'm just saying this so that you are not carried away that an investigation which was yet to start has ended, all by the Bureau of National Investigation of contaminated fuel of a person purported to have financed the New Patriotic Party. As you heard leading members deal with this issue, company over there now in famous 5 million liters contaminated fuel affair. Following the expose, the National Petroleum Authority had an official release confirming our position. Also, another state institution to somersault after a few hours. The statement went as far as confirming that the activities of these entities therefore infringes on Section 11 of the National Petroleum Authority Act 691 of 2005. The Minister of Energy, Mr. Boakye Agyarko, whose ministry has supervisory role over this petroleum sector SOE, subsequently issued a statement a day after our press conference on the 28th of June, in which he promised setting up an 8-member investigative committee to look into the scandal. I'm sure that process is being strangulated by the BNI. So as for the minister, he shouldn't be doing press conferences again, because who is to believe him again? You set up a committee, you are told that the committee cannot work.
All right, so Haruna Iddrisu, who is minority leader in Parliament, and we will shortly bring you Mr. Boakye Agyarko, who gave a press conference that led to the series of reactions that we are seeing and hearing, coming from Imani, coming from Occupy Ghana, the minority, and other stakeholders in the petroleum industry. But I start with Ace Ankomah, and Occupy Ghana issued a statement. And Ace, your concern is in your very first paragraph. You say, "We were happy to wait for the results of the ministerial committee that was announced to investigate the matter before making our comment public. That is why we want to place on record our objection to any person or institution trying to short-circuit, prejudge, and prejudice the work of the committee even before it is formed." What are you saying?
Johnson, often we lose the plot when we focus on people alone as a process. And that is where the politicians, I believe, deliberately get it wrong. The issue is not about the MP. The issue is that we are discovering a history where some fuel imported into Ghana with your taxpayer money and mine then gets classified by various names, sludge, flop, off-spec, and now contamination, and is sold cheaply. Now, it has actually become such a business that people are able to write letters applying to sell some of your taxpayer money and bought fuel so he can increase his lifestyle before his family. And so the question we should be asking is that, why is this happening? How does BOST operate? Is it, for example, the case that the facilities which store these have been given to a manager? And so it is possible that this got contaminated while in the custody of a manager. And if that is the case, why is Paul taking the hit? Why isn't the manager explaining to us how 5 million liters of fuel imported with your taxpayer money and mine got contaminated, that it has to be sold for a song and a dance on the market? And this is so rampant that there are benchmarks. What happened in this instance? Was it contamination or was it the normal flow? If it was contamination, what caused it? Was it caused by negligence or criminality? Or is it that the fuel we import has an expiry date, and so it starts self-contaminating after a while? When did the fuel arrive in Ghana? How much did we pay for it? In whose hands was the fuel when the fuel got contaminated? On which date did we discover the contamination? You see, we must pass the entire transaction through the loop, the legal rubric. Then we'll discover whether there are weak and loose points that we need to tighten. When we pass the transaction through the legal rubric, we might just also find out that maybe somebody has done something wrong, or maybe nobody has done something wrong, and we ought to declare the dead man a hero. But to jump all of these processes and either attack or seek to exonerate the man, we think it is completely as off-spec as the fuel that we are talking about.
Okay.
That is the point we are making. We don't know. There are many unanswered questions. If by which process we then decide to sell the fuel? There are two sections of the Procurement Act that every government pretends doesn't exist. People assume that the Procurement Act only relates to when the government is procuring something. They ignore two sections which regulate when government assets are being procured. There must be a technical report. There must be a board of survey. The board of survey must issue a report. The report must be approved by the head of the institution. A process for selling or disposing should be put out there, and it is usually by auction or public tender. So we need to pass this transaction and all the historical transactions where this particular thing is concerned through this legal test. Then we might find out whether this is sheer negligence, gross negligence, or actually criminality. That is when we should focus on the people.
And that sort of exercise will lead to what I find to be your most important question, which is your last question. You have 19 questions. Your last question says, has Ghana suffered any financial loss from this transaction? And if so, are there grounds to charge anyone with the offense of causing financial loss?
Yes, it is at the tail end of the issue. You don't answer the question before you begin to solve the problem.
Right.
And that is our main problem with what is happening right now.
But you also refer to and ask questions about whether or not the Petroleum Act or the National Petroleum Authority Act has been breached. By your reading of what the NPA has said earlier, the NPA had issued a release on its preliminary findings and was very categorical that Section 11 of that act had been breached and that one needed to be licensed to do this job.
Absolutely. There is the waste oil license, and we are aware that I think there are 2 licenses that have been issued. So you see, if you pass this transaction and the other transaction through the legal test, we will find out who sold the waste oil in times past and who is selling this now or who is buying this now. Is the person licensed? If the entity is not licensed, then well, at least something wrong has been done. And the circumstances surrounding this entity, we are seeing things. Some say it's a company. The same people who says it's a company says it's a sole proprietorship. And I begin to scratch my head. It can't be a sole proprietorship and a company at the same time.
No.
So there are questions to be asked, and then we'll get into licensing, incorporation, registration, dealership. Then we know the full story. But before the full story is told, the gentleman is being attacked, and the BNI then come and do this. Okay, let's leave it at that.
It's hogwash.
Maybe an attempted whitewashing. Why is this happening? The BNI report and an investigative body, one would think that these legal considerations will be at the top of their mind before they answer a question that is still being developed. So that, I must admit, and a few other whitewashings by the BNI in times past.
It's how different is what the BNI reportedly has done is that from what the NPA had done earlier by coming out and categorically stating that there had been a breach of the law and sanctions ought to follow. If the BNI also has made, the NPA, if the BNI has also come out and made conclusions, you say they are making opinions on who is culpable and who is not culpable. How different is that from what the NPA had done in the first place?
I'll tell you what, the NPA gave a view on its law as a regulator of its law. It says that it's simple. We have only licensed a certain number of companies to engage in this business. The person or the entity mentioned is not licensed by us. That's simple. The NPA didn't attempt to go into whether the managing director was effective or ineffective. I would, maybe the NPA is also but under these circumstances, I will not cover the NPA that hard because this is our law. We are the regulators. We have not licensed this entity to engage in waste oil business. That's plain, that's simple. So my view is this. The BNI report, the NPA report, all of those should be taken and given to the committee. The committee is not bound by any of them. It can even decide to reject them or accept them. But we need to get to the bottom of this because Ghana is bleeding money. And any situation we find under which Ghana is bleeding money, Ghanaians ought to insist that we plug the hole and stitch the wound. And, under the Supreme Court's very interesting expansion of the powers of the Auditor General, people should start being afraid. Because this Auditor General can simply walk in today and demand documents and say, I'm doing a special audit.
Okay.
And as a result of that special audit, exercise his disallowance and search powers. The day the Auditor General starts doing this, Ghana is going to be a very interesting country.
Okay.
So forget police, because Auditor General has powers given by the Constitution, affirmed by the Supreme Court. He can come in right now and demand these documents, and if he determines that any expenditure was illegal or that Ghana has lost money through misconduct or negligence, he will disallow the transaction. He will surcharge people. People pay their tax money to begin to set up.
I was going to ask what the effect of any committee's work will be now that we have conclusions that have been reached, and you actually expressed concern about prejudging and being prejudicial, and these have already happened. But I gather that you preempt that by saying that they should take all the 2 reports and work with them, but they are not bound by them. But what do you make of what the government seems to say? They have given us a tall list of previous, purchases of such products or products of the like without license. So why should it be different this time?
Well, so we breached the law in times past. Isn't the Bible that says that how long shall we live in sin so that grace may abound? Really? Look, I'm saying that all of those transactions need to be vetted.
Okay.
So what the government has given to us as vet is a historical record of facts that the committee needs to investigate. It does not exonerate anything being done wrong today. If it was done wrong yesterday, that is why probably some people are no longer in power. And so it doesn't previous things don't exonerate current sins.
Right.
And so I say that take all of this together, for whatever they are worth, give it to a committee of high-standing people who understand the industry. Let them pass this through all of it. Then let's see what will happen. But we need to stop this movie.
So as far as you are concerned, if the investigations go as far as we are made to understand when these dozens of other companies were involved, even union members or a union were buying these products, we're going to have some prosecutions to deal with.
We might not. But something, it worries me that an industry funded with my taxpayer money and yours routinely damages products. And instead of stopping the damage, it has become a lucrative business for employees of the industry. Really? The employees who probably are responsible for the off-spec happening or whatever happening, I don't know the technical term, then benefit from it. And it has become a business. And we have a tall list of people benefiting from it. Am I the only one who thinks something wrong with this picture?
Okay. Thank you very much, Ace. Thanks indeed for your time. And Ace Ankoma is a lawyer and also a leading member of the Occupy Ghana that Kwaku Baako gave special mention at the, the Krontini Akwamu lectures of the CDD. And they have also become the talk of town. People are surprised and shocked that today the NDC is referring to the Occupy Ghana because they had branded them as, an appendage of the NPP. And suddenly the NDC is harping on the reports by the Occupy Ghana to make its case in the public. Thank you once again. Now let's hear the Minister, Boakye Agyarko, and we'll continue in the studio.
The contamination of the 5 million litres occurred on January the 18th. This was before the current BOST MD assumed office. BOST, as a matter of practice, has sold contaminated products as far back as 2014. BOST received expressions of interest for the purchase of contaminated products from 15 companies, and Movenpina offered the highest price of 1 cedi 30 pesos, which formed the basis for the selection. This is the highest price ever offered for contaminated products. 8, it is not the case that the MD of BOST owns the company that bought the products. And 9, it is also not true that the address of or phone number of Movinpina is the same as that of the BOST MD. Review and introduce new regulations on the sale and discharge of contaminated products. B, codify and publish widely a competitive tender process based on transparent advertisement for the sale of products that have become contaminated. C, register and certify only corporate entities that will be designated to buy contaminated products directly from BOST. No unlicensed company, individual, or union member can trade in contaminated products henceforth. Head of the Chemical Engineering Department of the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, an acknowledged expert in the field, to lead the committee, to consult all relevant stakeholders, to review the entire operations of BOST in order to prevent future contamination of products.
That's the Honorable Boakye Ejiako, who is Minister for Energy, and he clearly is coming under a lot of flack for Kwaku. People are asking, what was the need? He had already come forward and announced this, establishment of a committee to take care of this situation. Why was there the need for him to come the second time and to seek to do what people now say obviously compromises or renders the committee useless?
Well, those who are making that assertion have a certain legitimate basis for making that assertion. I'm not saying their conclusions are wholly true in terms of talking about cover-up or no cover-up. But I think the process was completely untidy. I think that the ministerial committee that was set up, of course, we were not given the membership. We were only told about the institutional representatives. We didn't know who and who were going to represent which institution. There was a certain broad consensus in support of the institution of that committee. There were a few noises here and there, but I think generally there was a certain commitment that let's have this committee do its work.
That's so.
I had little problems here and there in terms of some of the institutions. Their reps had spoken, I heard on radio and TV, if you recall, making prejudicial statements. Even the NPA, but the NPA, like ACE, I was thinking that the point about contaminated fuel having gotten onto the market and creating fear and panic, there was the need for a quick reaction to that to determine whether indeed there was contaminated. So if they said there was none, that was okay. It didn't really have much of a prejudicial effect on the committee's work in spite of the claim. There's
a letter to the president that's challenging that and giving suggestions and claims that go to the effect that the product had actually gone out of the market and that this, there probably was some new tanks that had been arranged to go sit there and to be used as to replace those tanks. I'll read portions shortly.
And those claims are backed with something of evidential value?
They refer to some substance of what the MPA, the BOST, and TOR have been engaged in so far.
No, nothing of evidential value has been brought forward. It's like the ASEP claim, or let me say the ASEP individual's claim about having bought fuel which contaminated his vehicle's tank. Did he tell us where he bought the fuel? These are simple things. You see, let people not make such claims. Even the minority made such a claim. You bought fuel at station A. Tell us. So that that station's facilities could be examined technically. so that we know that indeed there's a contaminated fuel here, and in case we can even link it to the boss, the one boss sold. There's a need for such serious things, not just putting anything out there in the public domain. But let me come back to my point. I am saying that the minister's press conference was premature and perhaps needless. And then what makes it untidy is the fact that the BNI, which is a component of the ministerial committee, is the one whose report is being used by the minister at the press conference. I found that very uncomfortable with that. And the BNI's findings appear restrictive and limited. Whatever it is, they could have submitted their findings to the committee for the committee to work on it and come out with the conclusions subsequently. That makes it very tidy. Look, as far as I'm concerned, I've checked. We are being told that the ministerial committee is still in existence, that it is not, what do you lawyers say, functus something.
Functus officio or collapsed.
It has not collapsed. And that it is now going to deal with a larger issue. The BNI ought not to be part of the new ministerial committee. Indeed, I'm asking for a reconstitution of that committee by a process of elimination of some of the components and substituting them with new ones, perhaps an expanded, or if you like, even a wholly independent committee, because of all the noise that has gone on. I'm telling you, I am not for one moment doubting the credibility of the findings of the BNI, that limited, restrictive findings. We may take a look at those subsequently. The committee that is coming can verify whether those findings are credible and have integrity. On the surface, they may look very good. Who owns the companies that attempt to link it to Mr. Obeng Boateng? Telephone numbers, addresses, all those things are easily verifiable. For me, they are no big deals. So no matter what the BNI says, those things will be subject to verification and authentication. But the way you handle the process is key for purposes of integrity. And I think right now, at this stage, the process has suffered a certain integrity deficit. So we need to go back and restart. Whatever
on the point of the product having gone onto the public or not, the market or not, this is the letter. It's headed "Open Letter to His Excellency the President." You have a copy.
I haven't read it, but I have a copy.
And this is the 4th of July, and it's sent to the President. Bossgate scandal. On page 9, it says that the Boss PRO and senior union president were categorical on Joy FM many times that the volume released to Zoop Oil was just 100,000 liters. To our utter shock, the MPA on the same day of the Boss claim confirmed that 471,000 liters had been released to Zoop Oil and an additional 380,000 liters loaded but seized. They asked the question, why was Boss blatantly and deliberately lying to the public? Then they move on to another point. They say, in the same interview above, in one breath, the PRO indicated that products had been sold to some steel factories. And in another breath, she said that there was no product released to any industry. Boss, in its press statement on the 22nd of June 2017, indicated that it had inspected the premises of Zoop Oil and was convinced that their storage facility could accommodate the volume of product. Mr. President, our intelligence indicates that the Zoop Oil makeshift facility has a maximum 500,000 liter capacity and not 5 million liters, or the 5 million suggested in the press release. The MPA reported that it could not account for 47,000 litres out of the 471,000 litres during its first inspection. In an interview later with Joy FM, 2 days later, it reports that the product was found in another tank at Zoop Oil. How could this be? Tanks are visible to any technical person in this industry. How did a tank suddenly surface overnight? This does not add up. It only tells one story: cover up and contamination of the truth.
And this document is signed by?
It's called Concerned Citizen, is it? Is this citizen or citizens? I think it's singular.
Signed, deeply concerned Ghanaians.
Yes, deeply concerned Ghanaians.
Who are
and
they?
Copied to the Chairman Council of State.
So you see, before, and I'm not going to undermine what they are saying, but who are they? They should be able to identify themselves.
It seems to have been done by some very technical people
It doesn't
in the
matter.
industry.
It doesn't matter. They can be the best professionals.
Okay.
You are raising very serious issues.
Right.
You are sending this thing to the president for action or further action. To the president, I don't think you hide your identity. Okay, that's the first thing. I think this is a deficit as far as the integrity of this document is concerned. I'm not challenging the contents.
Okay.
But you see, what you've raised are discrepancies that they are cataloging for them, showing that perhaps there is something missing somewhere. I concede. Those are discrepancies if indeed the accounts are factual. The things that have been put out there are factual, that PRO said this and then turn around to see another thing. These are discrepancies worthy of evaluation in order to determine whether the thing is credible or not credible. But they are not conclusive that contaminated fuel indeed is in the market. The industries that received those contaminated fuel, they are not buried in the sun. They should be known. Those whose vehicles are suffering because of contaminated fuel, they bought them at stations that are visible. We should know it. Look, that's what we should do to ourselves. We should not be allowed, we should not be just entitled to make claims that there's a contaminated fuel in the market without pointing to stations where we are buying those things from. It's not fair. We want to solve this matter. It's a real matter, a serious case. In solving this serious case, let those making comments also be serious and supply the information. Not just speculate, not just put out suspicions. You remember, last week I had to quote to you what Chief Justice Akoko said. A multiplicity of suspicions. It's no basis for you to find somebody guilty. And I'm not talking of an individual, I'm talking of an issue. So what I'm saying is that, look, with all these discrepancies and the untidy nature in which the minister and all of them have handled it, we need to reconstitute a serious committee of inquiry into the matter. That's my view. So for me, at this stage, I have an open mind. Let's start from the beginning and address all those issues. Even the BNI's findings are subject to verification.
Right. And like Kweku said, let's all keep an open mind. I think it helps. We'll take a break. When we return, we will hear from the two politicians, and then we'll hear from the governance, experts on how to proceed on this matter and the charge of lack of commitment to fight corruption by the Akufo-Addo administration. Does it really stick?